You know that feeling when your phone is working perfectly fine? Like you're texting, you're scrolling, you're taking pictures that honestly look great, and then Apple or Samsung holds a big fancy event and suddenly your phone feels slow? Nothing changed. Nothing actually changed. Your phone didn't get slower overnight. The camera didn't get worse. The battery didn't suddenly decide to quit. And yet, somehow, after watching 40 minutes of some executive in a black turtleneck talking about revolutionary features, you're holding your 2-year-old device like it personally offended you. That's a weird thing, right? Like, that's genuinely a strange psychological experience if you stop and actually think about it. Your perfectly functional piece of technology became emotionally outdated the moment someone showed you something shinier. And the craziest part? The companies doing this aren't being sneaky about it. They're not hiding it. It's basically their entire business model, and most of us participate in it willingly, enthusiastically even, every single year. My name is Sam, and I spend probably way too much time thinking about technology, consumer psychology, and the strange, invisible forces that convince perfectly rational people to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on things they genuinely don't need. I've gone down the rabbit hole on planned obsolescence, software update politics, marketing psychology, and the history of how tech companies learn to manufacture desire out of thin air. And honestly, the more I learned, the more I couldn't unsee it everywhere. Today we're going to talk about what I call the upgrade illusion, this fascinating, kind of maddening phenomenon where new technology doesn't just make itself seem better, it makes your existing, functional device seem worse. We're going to look at how it actually works, why it's so effective, who profits from it, and most importantly, what you can actually do about it so you stop feeling like you're perpetually behind a curve that literally never ends. Because here's the thing I want you to walk away with. The feeling that your device is outdated? That feeling is a product. It's manufactured, polished, and delivered directly to your brain with extraordinary precision. And once you see the machinery behind it, it genuinely loses some of its power over you. Let's get into it. Part 1. The moment obsolescence was invented. So here's a question I want you to sit with for a second. Who decided that you need a new phone every 2 years? Not nature, not physics, not some immutable law of the universe that says, "Thou shalt upgrade thy device biannually." That timeline was invented, deliberately, by people who needed to keep selling things. To understand the upgrade illusion, you actually have to go back almost 100 years. Before smartphones, before computers, before any of this, to a guy named Alfred Sloan, who was running General Motors in the 1920s. At the time, Henry Ford had basically cracked the code on making cars affordable. The Model T was reliable, it was cheap, it got you from point A to point B. Ford's whole philosophy was, make something good and make it last. Sloan looked at that and thought, that's a terrible business model if you want to keep growing. So he came up with something radical. Every year, GM would release a new model of their cars with cosmetic changes, new colors, slightly different body shapes, new chrome accents. The cars didn't become more reliable. The engines weren't fundamentally different, but they looked different. And Sloan bet, correctly, that people would feel embarrassed driving last year's model once this year's was on the road. He called it the annual model change, but what he was really doing was engineering social pressure into the act of ownership. He was making your perfectly functional car feel inadequate just by releasing something new next to it. That strategy was so successful that it became the foundational playbook for basically every consumer goods industry that followed. And today's tech companies have taken it and refined it into something so sophisticated, so psychologically precise, that most people can't even feel it happening. The name for this phenomenon, planned obsolescence, has been around for decades. But what makes modern tech unique is that it's not just physical obsolescence, it's psychological obsolescence. Your phone isn't just aging in the drawer, it's aging in your mind, shaped by marketing, software updates, and social comparison. And that distinction matters a lot. Part 2. The two types of obsolescence, and why one is a lie. Okay, So let me break this down, because it's actually a really useful distinction to have in your head. There are basically two kinds of obsolescence at play in the tech world. The first is genuine technological obsolescence. This is real and it's legitimate. There are moments in history where technology genuinely leaps forward so dramatically that old devices truly can't keep up. Like, you can't run a modern operating system on a 2005 laptop. You can't stream 4K video on hardware that was built before 4K existed. These are real physical limitations. The old device isn't being made to feel bad, it just genuinely cannot do the new thing. That kind of obsolescence? Fine. Expected. That's progress. The second type is manufactured or perceived obsolescence. This is where things get sneaky. This is when your device is technically capable of doing what you need it to do, but a combination of software changes, marketing messaging, social pressure, and subtle psychological manipulation makes you feel like it can't, or shouldn't, or that using it reflects poorly on you somehow. Here's a really clear example. Think about what happens when a new iPhone comes out. Apple shows you the new camera, the new chip, the new dynamic island thing, or whatever they're calling it this year. And then they show you a side-by-side comparison of the new camera versus, well, they never actually compare it to last year's camera in a way that shows the difference in your everyday photos. They compare it to professional cinema cameras and talk about how it can shoot in ProRes format and track subjects with machine learning. Now, do you shoot in ProRes format? Do you need machine learning subject tracking? Probably not. But the implied message is clear. The new phone is on the level of professional filmmaking equipment, which makes your old phone feel like a Fisher-Price toy in comparison, even though nothing about your actual use case has changed. That gap between what you actually need and what you're made to feel you're missing is where the upgrade illusion lives. And it is relentlessly, almost artistically engineered. Part 3. Software updates and the slowdown conspiracy. That's kind of real. Alright, this one gets a little spicy, because there's actual documented history here that most people don't know about. In 2017, Apple quietly admitted, after independent researchers proved it mathematically, that they had been throttling the performance of older iPhones through iOS updates. The official explanation was that they were protecting aging batteries from sudden shutdowns, which is, technically a real concern. But the effect was that your older phone, after updating to the latest iOS, would run noticeably slower, which, conveniently, made the new iPhones look dramatically faster by comparison. Apple settled a class action lawsuit over this for $500 million, $500 million, and then largely moved on, and so did most of the consumer population, because the news cycle is brutal and short. But here's the thing I want you to think about. Even if Apple's explanation was entirely genuine, even if every slowdown was purely about battery protection, the outcome is still the same. You update your phone, it gets slower, new phones feel faster, you feel the pull toward upgrading. The intention almost doesn't matter when the mechanism produces the same result. And this isn't just Apple. Android devices have a well-documented pattern where software support is cut off after a certain number of years, which means your phone stops receiving security updates, which means it becomes a genuine security risk, which means you feel justified, pressured even, into buying a new one. The hardware may still work perfectly, but the software ecosystem has been withdrawn. This is actually a form of obsolescence that is becoming increasingly controversial in Europe. There are real legislative battles happening right now around something called the right to repair and extended software support mandates, where regulators are essentially trying to force tech companies to support devices for longer periods. Some companies have pushed back hard. Others have started extending support timelines, but usually only after being compelled to. The point isn't that tech companies are cartoonish villains sitting in dark rooms twirling mustaches. It's that the incentive structure of a company that profits from hardware sales is fundamentally misaligned with your interest in keeping your existing hardware. Of course they're going to design systems that nudge you toward upgrading. That's just rational capitalism. Understanding that doesn't make you cynical. It makes you a smarter consumer. Part 4. The social layer. Keeping up with the device Joneses. Okay, so beyond the software stuff, there's another mechanism that I think is actually more powerful for most people, and it's almost never talked about in these conversations. And that's the social dimension of tech ownership. Because here's a truth that's a little uncomfortable. For a lot of people, especially in certain social circles or professional environments, the device you carry is a subtle status signal. I'm not saying this to be judgmental, it's just true, and it's deeply human. We've been using objects to signal status since we were living in caves wearing nicer animal skins than the next guy. When everyone around you has the new iPhone and you're still on a model from 3 years ago, there's a low-grade social friction. Maybe someone notices. Maybe someone makes a comment about your old phone. Maybe no one says anything, but you're aware of the difference. That awareness is uncomfortable, and discomfort is a powerful motivator. Tech companies understand this intimately. It's not an accident that new design language changes are often highly visible. Notch shapes, camera bump designs, color options, while performance improvements are largely invisible. You can't see a better processor, but you can absolutely see whether someone is holding last year's phone or this year's phone. The whole ecosystem of tech YouTube, tech Twitter, tech TikTok, all of it amplifies this relentlessly. Is it worth upgrading videos get millions of views? Unboxing videos get millions of views. I switched from X to Y and here's what happened gets millions of views. The entire media apparatus around consumer tech is structured around the assumption that upgrading is the default state. And the question is just which upgrade and when. Never whether you need to upgrade at all. And I'll be honest with you, I've felt this pull myself. I've watched a phone review and felt my current phone become slightly less satisfying in real time. It's not logical, it's emotional. And the emotional response has been carefully cultivated by billions of dollars in marketing and a media ecosystem that profits from your desire to upgrade. Part 5. The real cost of the upgrade cycle. Let me put some numbers on this because I think it's genuinely sobering when you actually lay it out. The average American replaces their smartphone every roughly 2.5 to 3 years. The average flagship phone costs somewhere between $800 and $1,200, depending on the brand and configuration. Let's call it $1,000 flat because round numbers are easier to work with. If you upgrade every 2.5 years from age 25 to age 65, that's 16 upgrade cycles. At $1,000 each, that's $16,000 spent on phones over a working lifetime. Now, factor in that money you spent at 25 could have been invested. At a pretty conservative 7% annual return in an index fund, the opportunity cost of that first upgrade alone compounds to somewhere around $12,000 by retirement. The total opportunity cost of the full upgrade pattern? We're easily talking about $50,000 to $80,000 in lost wealth potential, depending on timing and returns. That number sounds insane. And look, I'm not saying never buy a phone. Obviously, a functional smartphone is a necessity in modern life. But the question isn't, do I need a phone? It's, do I need this phone now when the one I have still works? And when you reframe it as, does this upgrade feel worth $50,000 to me? The answer changes a little. The dynamic island starts to feel less revolutionary. Beyond just the financial cost, there's the environmental dimension, which honestly deserves its own video. The rare earth minerals in your phone, the manufacturing footprint, the e-waste problem. Upgrading devices at the pace the industry wants us to creates a genuinely staggering environmental burden. Millions of perfectly functional devices end up in landfills because the industry successfully manufactured the feeling that they were inadequate. Part 6. The Chipmaker's Dilemma. When progress genuinely slows down. Here's a fascinating wrinkle in all of this that I think is worth talking about because it complicates the narrative a little. For decades, basically from the 1960s through the 2000s, a principle called Moore's Law meant that computing power genuinely doubled roughly every 2 years. If you bought a computer in 2001 and then bought one in 2003, it was legitimately, dramatically faster. Not marginally, dramatically. Like, 10 times faster wasn't uncommon. So the upgrade cycle had a real technological justification. The old machine genuinely couldn't do what the new one could. But Moore's law has been slowing down, like, significantly. The gains between processor generations in modern smartphones are increasingly incremental. 15% faster, 20% faster, maybe 30% in a good year. Which is fine, that's still progress, but it's not the dramatic leap that justified a new phone purchase in the early smartphone era. What this means is that the marketing of upgrades has had to work harder as the actual improvements become less impactful. Companies can't just say, "It's twice as fast," anymore, because it's usually not. So they invent new categories of features to desire: computational photography, AI chips, satellite connectivity, whatever the next thing is. And they tell a story about how these features are transformative, even when most users will never use them in any meaningful way. Think about it. The whole pro-photography angle of modern flagship phones? Most people use their phones to take pictures of food, their friends, and the occasional sunset. These are tasks that a 3-year-old smartphone handles perfectly well. But by positioning phones as professional filmmaking tools, by sponsoring film festivals, by getting renowned directors to shoot movies on iPhones, companies expand the psychological ceiling of what you think you're missing. You're not buying a faster phone. You're buying a story about what kind of person you could be with it. That's extraordinarily clever. And it works because humans don't actually make purchases on pure rational calculation. We make them on aspiration, identity, and emotion. Part 7. The good enough threshold and why it's liberating. So here's where I want to introduce a concept that genuinely changed how I think about tech consumption, and it's called the good enough threshold. There is a point at which a device's capabilities are sufficient for everything you actually use it for. Let's call this the good enough line. Once a device crosses that line, every feature added above it is, by definition, something you didn't need. And the industry's entire job is to make you forget that line exists. For most people, like, truly, the statistical majority of smartphone users, the good enough threshold was crossed years ago. If you're using your phone to message, call, browse the web, use social media, take casual photos, and stream video, a 5-year-old flagship does all of that. Not worse than you need, not inadequately. Fine, completely fine. Now, there are absolutely people who have legitimate reasons to upgrade. If you're a mobile photographer and the camera improvements genuinely affect your work, that's real. If you're a developer and you need certain hardware capabilities, that's real. If your battery genuinely cannot hold a charge and the repair cost approaches the cost of a new device, that's a real decision point. I'm not trying to romanticize keeping a dead device alive, but the key question, the question I'd encourage you to ask yourself every time you feel that upgrade itch is, what specific thing can I not do right now that I need to do? And I mean specifically, not vaguely, not, it's a little slow sometimes. Specifically, what actual task in your actual life is this device failing to perform? If you can answer that with a clear, concrete example, you probably have a legitimate reason to upgrade. If you're reaching, if the answer is something like, the new camera has 48 megapixels, then what you're experiencing is the upgrade illusion doing its job, not a genuine technological limitation. This question sounds simple, but it is shockingly difficult to answer honestly in the middle of a new product hype cycle. Part 8. The right to repair movement and what it means for you. I want to talk about something that's gaining real momentum and I think deserves more attention in mainstream conversations about tech consumption. The right to repair movement. For years, tech companies made it extremely difficult, and in some cases legally questionable, to repair your own devices or have them repaired by independent shops. Proprietary screws, glued together components, software locks that prevented replacement parts from working unless the company activated them. The design of modern electronics often seems less like engineering and more like architecture specifically aimed at making repair economically impractical. If your screen cracks on a recent iPhone, the official repair cost can run $200 to $400. If you're sitting on a $400 phone from 2 years ago, suddenly a new phone for $700 only costs $300 more than the repair, and it comes with all the new features. That math is designed. The repair cost isn't incidental, it's a nudge. But things are actually changing here. The EU has been aggressively pushing right-to-repair legislation that requires manufacturers to make spare parts available for a minimum number of years, design products that can be opened and repaired, and provide software support for longer windows. The US has seen similar pressure at the state and federal level, with real progress in several states. Companies like Framework, which makes a laptop literally designed to be upgraded component by component, are building an alternative model from scratch. And while they're still niche, the fact that they exist and have a passionate customer base suggests that consumers are hungry for a different relationship with their technology. What you can do right now, practically speaking, look at iFixit scores before buying a device. Consider brands with longer official software support windows. Google's Pixel line has moved to 7 years, which is genuinely meaningful. And before you upgrade, genuinely investigate whether a battery replacement or a screen repair would extend the useful life of your current device by another 2 or 3 years. Often it will. Often the math is overwhelming in favor of the repair. Part 9. The psychological trick to break the upgrade cycle. Okay, so last section before we wrap up. And this one is maybe the most personally useful. Once you understand the mechanics of the upgrade illusion, once you know about the manufacturer desire, the software nudges, the social signaling, the marketing that makes features seem more essential than they are, you still have to actually live in the world. And in the world, product launches happen. Hype cycles happen. Your friends will get new devices and yours will look older. The feeling of inadequacy will still occasionally show up. So what's the practical psychological tool here? It's what I'd call a deliberate desire delay practice. It works like this. When you feel the upgrade impulse, whether it's from a product launch, a comparison, or just scrolling through tech content, you don't say no. You say, not yet. You give yourself 30 days. Write down what you want and why. Be specific. What exactly are you hoping the new device will do or feel like? What problem are you solving? After 30 days, revisit that note. Most of the time, not always, but most of the time, the desire has faded significantly. The new product is no longer new. The hype has moved on to something else. And the thing you wrote down as your justification either still seems valid and you proceed thoughtfully, or it seems slightly embarrassing in retrospect, like, I wanted a new phone because I like the color option, and you put the wallet away. This works because most tech desire is acute. It peaks around launch events and media cycles and then gradually dissipates. You're not fighting the desire permanently, you're just outlasting the spike, which is much easier psychologically. Pair this with genuinely learning to appreciate what your current device does well. This sounds cheesy, but it's neuroscience basically. The same cognitive framing that makes your phone feel inadequate after watching an Apple keynote can work in reverse. Spend a few minutes noticing what your device does brilliantly. The apps that open instantly. The photo you took last week that looks great. The way it fits in your hand because you've had it for 2 years and it's comfortable. Gratitude isn't just a wellness buzzword here. It's a genuine counterweight to manufactured desire. So here's where we land. The upgrade illusion is real. It's old. Older than smartphones, older than computers, older than most industries we'd associate with tech. The psychology of manufacturing desire by making existing things feel inadequate goes back at least 100 years and has been refined into something extraordinarily sophisticated by the modern tech industry. Your device slows down after updates, sometimes deliberately, sometimes as a side effect of software designed for newer hardware. Your social environment signals that newer is better. Your media diet is structured around an assumption of perpetual upgrading. And beneath all of it, the financial incentives of every company involved are pointed in the same direction, toward you buying something new. But here's the thing I hope you take with you. Understanding the system doesn't mean opting out of technology entirely. That's not realistic, and frankly, modern technology is genuinely wonderful in a lot of ways. It means opting out of the feeling that the system creates, the low-grade dissatisfaction, the sense that you're perpetually behind, the quiet anxiety that your device, your tool, somehow reflects inadequacy about you as a person. Your phone is a tool. It's a very good tool. It doesn't define you, and its age doesn't define your sophistication, your success, or your worth. And if it still does what you need it to do, then by every rational measure, it is still a good phone. The next time you watch a product launch and feel that familiar pull, that gentle but insistent whisper that what you have isn't enough anymore, I want you to pause and recognize what you're feeling, not as weakness, not as stupidity, but as the intended, engineered response to a very carefully designed stimulus. And then go use the phone you have. Take a picture with it. It'll probably be great. Because honestly, the best device you own is the one in your hand right now. The industry just really doesn't want you to believe that. Thanks for watching.